My name is Devin Carter, and I'm the host and editor of Dead Genre Chronicles, a critical podcast on the diversity of JRPGs.
I'm Becky.
I'm Leroy.
And this is going to be a slightly longer introduction video to our style and focus of critical discussion on the topic of JRPGs, which is a subgenre of video games that we all like a lot, I think.
I would hope so.
I mean,
I hate them.
I mean,
we hate some of them.
Yeah, some bad ones.
So let's start, actually, with why the podcast is called Dead Genre Chronicles, and the Twitter is @JRPGsAreDead, and the website is jrpgsaredead.fyi, and why we have committed so hard to this meme about, quote, JRPGs are dead, which is not because we actually think that JRPGs are dead.
It is deeply couched in irony.
I tell people it's postmodern.
You would. Leroy's critical approach is that, basically. That's not fair. Delete that, Devin. There was a period about getting on for 10 years ago now, where the Japanese share of the international video games market shrunk dramatically. For a variety of reasons. Partly it was that the international games market grew substantially and Japanese industry didn't grow with it, or particularly the RPG section of the Japanese industry didn't grow with it. Partly it was a hardware problem with the relationship between the Xbox 360 and the PS3. And partly it was just that tastes changed, business practices changed, the economics of making video games changed. And that led to a period in the Japanese industry of panic, effectively. You can find people like the president of Square Enix at the time saying, there's a crisis. And at the same time, the YouTube video game reviewer gets started. Not any one specific one, although we could easily name a couple of significant examples. And a couple of significant examples did make a point of using JRPGs, particularly Final Fantasy, as a bit of a punching bag, an easy punchline. And that, I think, is the combination of those two things happening, is where this idea that this genre, if genre it is, got into trouble.
In some respects, the purchasing habits of JRPGs never really changed, but during this time period, people were identifying, I guess, Final Fantasy 13 came out, but regardless, people who paid attention to JRPGs, the people who would say these things about JRPGs would pay attention to the mainstream, and mainstream JRPGs weren't delivering on what they expected for JRPGs to do, and they took longer and longer to come out, and so that also furthered their impression that JRPGs are over, basically, because the 2 or 3 or 4 games they played a year weren't conforming to what they expected from the genre.
Yes, I mean, Final Fantasy, for example, went from 4 games in 5 years to 3 games in 10. Or 9, I think. And one of those was FF10-2, which, for a whole variety of reasons, most of which are completely unfair to the actual text of that game, has been pretty roundly dismissed by a big section of the Western obnoxious gamer market type people. So that is our working theory of what the death of the JRPGs actually was. But it lingers on in a lot of the writing that floats around the internet about JRPGs. Even, we're in the middle of FF15 release hype at the moment, and that is attracting a lot of opinion pieces to the effect that JRPGs should go back to doing something that they used to do, or should stop doing something that they've always done. Big sweeping generalizations that really reveal that the authors don't know the breadth of things that JRPGs have always done, or that they are doing right now.
There's a real air of like Final Fantasy 15 is this make it or break it video game, when Dragon Quest 11 is coming out like the next year right after.
Yep. And something that happened with the quote death of the JRPGs period, let's say 2006 to 9, is that towards the end of it, you have FF13, Nier comes out, Tales of Vesperia is around that time, and then a huge wealth, an explosion of new JRPGs that do quite well. You know, if you compare them to similarly budgeted and similar scaled titles from the previous generation, do fine. But because there is already a myth going on that there's a problem, their modest success is seen as failure. And I think we've started a new console generation since then. There has been a lull. It's now everything's picking up again. FF15, a new Tales game, and Persona 5, finally, of course. Assuming it comes out. It's never coming out. Assuming it comes out. I think we're going to see the same kind of upswing. And what I really hope is that we can just push the dialogue past talking points that are now a decade old.
Mm-hmm. I also do want to bring up the fact that, like, especially with the transition into Gen 7, there was still a lot of JRPG development going on PlayStation 2, which was Gen 6. Like, to the point where, like, Tales of Vesperia and Persona 4 came out in the same year on disparate, like, hardware. And the problem is that Japanese developers are often hesitant to jump to a new piece of hardware for development when they're still working on projects for the old stuff. It's gotten a bit better with cross-play stuff, like Persona 5 is cross-play PS3, PS4 in Japan. I don't remember if we're going to be getting PS3, PS4. I think we are. But it's alongside the PS3 just coming out later. That's why there wasn't a whole lot of JRPGs, because Xbox was Microsoft and not a Japanese company.
Yes, it should also be noted at that time that people who were working at Microsoft at that time, at the time of the Xbox launch, say that Microsoft specifically targeted Japanese development to displace it, really, as a dominant market force. Part of which meant getting JRPGs off a Japanese console, so you have a few weird Xbox exclusives, but also meant kind of doing anything they could to outcompete whatever JRPGs did emerge. So it's not all accident or oversight or laggardly dev practices in Japan, let's say.
It was also a gross misinterpretation of the market, because Microsoft thought they could just do those practices and people would convert to the brand, but that's that's not how it worked.
Yeah.
But besides the life and death of the RPG, I've been playing since I could read. I've been playing RPG since I could read, so obviously the reason why it's such a joke is because to me they never died. They've always came out like this. There's always just been a niche who plays the Dark Spire, whatever games that no one's ever heard of and no one really cares about. And I think there's a lot of untapped potential in the form, and I think it's like a very specific style of video game that has like a history of communication that we can break down and explain and relate to all these different games.
Yes, there's incredible strength in depth in the, what are we now, 35 years of games in this area, most of which nobody in the West talks, well, like 3 people on Twitter talk about besides us. And many of and not all of those, there are Xenogears out there and Wild Arms 1s out there, but many of those deserve much better memory than, quote, video games has.
We can I mean, they are a subgenre, but we can also look at them as an art movement. If we cast a wider net from JRPGs to the so-called console-style RPGs or turn-based RPGs, all these are the traditions and mechanics and the form are being iterated in new and interesting ways.
Yeah.
Undertale is an example a lot of people have already played.
Yeah, or Undertale is the recent big one. Before that, there are other much hyped games of one stripe or another, maybe not quite on the scale of Undertale, but Off comes to mind, for example. That was some people were hugely excited by 3 years ago, I guess. So this, all the different parts of this tradition, in one way or another, are still live and can be traced way, way back. And I think a lot of what we try to do is assert that lineage rather than taking specific high watermarks of the genre as islands without relationship to each other. We're trying to trace explanatory links between the games almost.
I like to create relationships to foster better understandings. That's what I do in my critical work, and that's what I do on here too.
This initially began, Dead Genre Chronicles initially began kind of as an excuse for me to work through some of my backlog, which is kind of a selfish thing, but it's become really important, and it's really been illuminating to see how many of the games that I never heard anyone talk about, or that I only heard a limited number of people talk about, how they fit into a canon that never really got... There's no real unified canon, especially in the West, and it's important.
We have learned in 15 episodes at time of speaking a heck of a lot about where these games and their ideas and their iconography come from. And I guess what we want to do is share that, basically.
And you wouldn't really expect it because we're talking about a lot of, we have been kind of saying, we're looking at stuff that isn't huge, but we have got some pretty important episodes out of things like Paper Mario: The Thousand-Year Door, which I don't think a whole lot of people would expect as, good critical fodder, nice gristle to chew on for a bit, but it's really a surprisingly solid indicator of, the undercurrents for JRPG discourse. And also playing things like Ni no Kuni and Xenogears that have reputations for being exceptionally exceptional.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to see the new wave of the angry YouTube game critic, you should listen to our Final Fantasy Tactics or Xenogears episodes where we show no mercy, even though we try to give these games our kindness, but they disappointed us.
Yeah,
they definitely did that. Yes.
The reason we called it Dead Genre Chronicles is this giant joke that this genre that is still going today and is somehow dead or dying or its form has faded, when from the very start it was a marketing label that some people decided fit games that worked like Dragon Quest. And then when it evolved past that, people got confused. And I just like the word Chronicles because it's a good indication of what we're doing. It started out as kind of a Xenoblade Chronicles goof, but it ended up being really apt for what we're doing, and we're tracing out important lines in the last 30 years that I don't think a lot of people appreciate. And it's also just a good reason to sit down and play a video game you might not have played, because you have other people to listen to opinions from and talk about the game with if it's giving you a hard time, or you just want to shout about something because it's really cool. I remember Nier, the Discord chat when we were doing Nier for our month. That was really good because people I liked got to play a game I liked and they enjoyed it. And then also, when we're playing bad games, we can all sit there and go, God, this sucks.
It is really, really nice to have some solidarity when tackling an obscure game that is also a pain in the ass to play. So, join us, because we play some pretty bad games sometimes.
Yeah, and we usually also will give, warnings when there's, stuff we're going to talk about with spoilers, or if there's going to be an episode where, this is a game you don't really need to worry about having spoiled for you because it's either so old that you kind of probably already got the plot, or so by the numbers that it's not a big deal, or just so bad that it's not something you should worry about, like Xenogears. I
we
remember,
keep coming back to Xenogears. Xenogears is a bad game, don't play it, listen to our episode on it instead.
Yeah.
Which is also a good way of getting a sense of what we're about as a podcast.
Yeah. But
the caveat for Xenogears really is you can listen to the podcast, and then you'll know if you'd want to suffer through it or not.
Yeah, pretty much.
And I'm just really happy with how this podcast has turned out over the last year and a quarter, because I think we've done really good critical work, and I don't think I would have ever stuck with most of these games if I hadn't had people to work through them with. And I am really proud of all our stuff, and I think if you give it a shot, if any of these games are games you've liked or not liked, if you play them and feel like listening to an episode, I would definitely recommend it. We are the damn best at what we do, even if it takes us a month an episode, because I cannot in good conscience ask my two co-hosts to play 30 to 60 hour games any faster than that.
Well, you could ask, but we'd die.
Yeah.
And then JRPGs Are Dead would be dead.
What Devin's saying is not even bragging. I can't endorse any other groups or much other writing I've read, and I don't think there's nothing really focused just on JRPGs that is as good as this.
And as niche as this is, we are the best, and I would like it very much if you gave one of our episodes a shot. Episodes that I could recommend, without prior knowledge of the game, would be Live Alive for the SNES, which is episode 1. Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door, which is episode 7, because that's a Paper Mario game. There's nothing really surprising about it. Xenogears, we've mentioned before, that's episode 8. Becky has a 40-minute lecture at the end about philosophy based on the last 10 minutes of the game. It's pretty amazing.
I mean, for reference, I'm paid 25 quid an hour for those.
Yeah,
so
she does a good job.
And it's free.
Yeah. Breath of Fire 2, also a good episode. Nier was actually split up into 2 episodes. The first one is going over our first year and kind of giving an overview.
That one's a really good place to start, that review of the year.
And also the second part of that is on Nier, which is a pretty good game that you should play, especially with the sequel coming out. We also did Ni no Kuni. Nier was episodes 13.1 and 13.2. 14 was Ni no Kuni. Also not a terribly packed game, so if you want to listen to that, you'll get a decent understanding of the gap between mainstream opinion on JRPGs and people who know what they're talking about JRPGs. And then our latest episode as of this recording is Dragon Quest V, which is episode 15, which is it cuts pretty hard to the bone about our entire mission, and I think it was one of our best episodes yet. Do you have any other bits to add on, you two?
For my ego, I liked the tactics episode because I did a lot of really deep dives and deep grabs of what it means to how to structure JRPG and how different mechanics come together and cohese and communicate, and how Final Fantasy Tactics specifically missed the bar in a lot of cases.
Yeah, I'd also say we've got another full year of podcasts planned out, We're doing things like Rogue Galaxy and Final Fantasy XII and Dragon's Dogma. And if you know of somebody that you think does good work on JRPGs that you would like to hear join us as a guest for a podcast episode, that schedule for the year is on the website somewhere. By all means, put people in touch with us. We would like to have more guests.
If you have any ideas for someone who is just good at game script generally that you think might be interesting to see their hand tried at JRPGs, suggest it to them as well. I think it would be interesting to see someone a bit out of their element, see if they can gel with the genre. You can find us on Twitter at JRPGsAreDead, or individually at Invisible for me, at EatThePen for Becky, and at WasNotWhyNot for Leroy. You can find our website at jrpgsaredead.fyi, and you can find us on Patreon at patreon.com/deadgenre. Thank you for listening, and I hope to see you soon.